episode 11 of the Technologist podcast, back after a short break. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, viewers. Welcome, people in the comments. Today with me is Milan Jovanović. Milan, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Spot on.
Welcome. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. Very nice to be here. I was excited when you reached out and invited me to come and talk with you. So let's open up with some interesting questions. And I already see we have comments.
Yeah, Daniel is joined us. I'm keeping holding Daniel accountable for joining us. So thank you for joining us, Daniel. If you have any questions, feel free. We're using a different software this time, so I've upped the production quality slightly for the podcast. Experimenting. If there's any technical problems today, we'll just go with it. So Milan, if you had to do a quick elevator pitch and introduce yourself, perhaps to my part of the audience that doesn't know you, you have a quite big following. What would the best short summary of what you do, who you are?
So, software engineer by day and content creator by night. Although you could say I'm a content creator 24/7 now. So I've been in the industry for like 6 years professionally. I became a senior engineer. I work primarily in .NET, so that's kind of my area of expertise. And then I moved up to software architect because that's something I really enjoy and like to talk about. And then recently I started creating content online, started getting some traction, and figured out that I can turn that into a career because I really enjoyed it. And so I decided to make a leap of faith and switch into content creation full time. And here I am now.
Amazing. And thank you for having the courage to go on this journey. I know it's not easy. I've been struggling with similar imposter syndrome problems as well myself. But before we get into the techie part, I happen to know by watching your previous podcasts that you're a avid chess player.
Yes, I'd say I'm an amateur still, but I really enjoy playing the game. My late grandfather taught me how to play, and that's how I got my love for the game.
Well, what's your favorite opening as white?
As white, so I like king's pawn. That would be pawn e4, and then knight f3, and then take it from there.
I'm more of a London system guy, so I like playing positionally. Do you visualize the board in your head, or do you?
I kind of try to, I don't know, just play some standard opening, and then I take it from there. I'm not a big strategist. I like to kind of take a look at the board, assess what are some of the weaknesses, and then try to be a little bit more aggressive, sacking some pieces and just having fun. So I like to have fun, more so for the love of the game than to actually beat someone. And I enjoy it a lot.
It sounds like you're playing like an engineer, not like a chess player. You know, like what would ChatGPT do? What would the algorithm do? Can I learn that?
So funny story. Back in college or university, I had a theory of games class, and the professor there, he developed his own chess engine, and he wrote it in assembly from scratch. It's like, I don't know, 200,000 lines of code.
Chess engine in the sense that it's a game that you can play, or is it the bot that plays the game?
Like a bot, a chess engine, like Stockfish and so on. And I think it has like an ELO rating of 3,500. So that's pretty good.
3,500? No, that's extreme. That's like
yeah. Well, it's a chess engine, yeah.
Oh my god. Okay. No, but that's really
well.
Good.
There are better engines out there, but the fact that he wrote it in assembly is what's impressive.
Okay. I can also see that there's a lot of World of Warcraft thematically in your background.
Yeah.
Still play? I see you don't have Dragonfight, so
So I've been playing for like the better part of the past decade, on and off. Recently, like when World of Warcraft Classic released, I joined in Burning Crusade. That was my favorite expansion, and been playing it up until this week. This week I quit because I wasn't enjoying it as much.
Mm.
And I decided to throw in the towel. Maybe I'll play a little bit in a few months if I miss it, but not really. I'm not a hardcore gamer. I
Fair.
enjoy it more for the company. I met some great people. We had a lot of fun playing together. And it's an old game. I mean, everything is solved.
Yeah, I mean, I used to play for almost a decade myself. I stopped 4 years ago
Hmm.
in Legion, I believe. Um, it's interesting because throughout my career, I had met a lot of software engineers playing the game. It sort of captures that demographic and our age group primarily.
Yeah.
How did it influence your career, if at all, or your passion for technology or architecture or problem solving? It is a complex system. It was
Ooh,
back then one of the most
um,
complex MMOs.
so in terms of problem solving, like I used to strategize a lot playing the game, and it's good for that part of your development personally. Problem solving. How do I solve this quest? How do I make a lot of gold? It's interesting when you try to think from an economical perspective. That's an angle I took recently when I started researching finance a little bit more. It's an amazing game, really. You can learn a lot from it, but it's also very addictive. Um, and it is something that I struggled with when I was in my teens. I would play all day long, but I guess it's something you grow into and you grow out of. I don't know. Recently, my priorities have switched a lot, so it wasn't a hard decision for me to cut it off.
Okay. On the topic of C# and .NET, to segue into our more technology-oriented discussions, you have recently been awarded the Microsoft MVP title. What's that
So,
about?
so that was very interesting how that transpired. Um, so it was the 1st of March, so literally 3 weeks ago.
It's my brother's
Uh,
birthday.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Imagine the coincidence. So it was my first day at my new job, which is my company. So that was the day I announced that I was going to be a content creator. And it was a very long day, and I was about to go to sleep. And I'm checking my email, and there's something from Microsoft. I thought it was some advertisement on something.
Spam.
And yes, on spam, literally. It landed in the promotions tab.
Yeah.
And I open it up, and like, you've been awarded the Microsoft MVP. Okay. And I had to read it like a few times to figure out that was what
It's
happened.
legit. Yeah.
So then I had to call everybody, tell them what happened. It was an awesome start to my new career. And it's something I've been kind of silently planning for the better part of the last 2 years. I learned about the program, and then I started researching how do you even become a Microsoft MVP. And I had a chance to meet a few MVPs from Serbia, and they are incredible people. They were very open, and they kind of gave me a few tips and tricks what I should do. And then I started applying those things, and which is basically what I do daily, like uh, just be in part of the community and contribute. So that's what I do on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and then I started a YouTube channel and also a
Yeah.
newsletter/blog.
And you're very active on Twitter, like conversationally, not just posting and shadowing from LinkedIn. But I saw that you're actually responding and you're doing threads.
That's something that I don't see people doing as much. I try to respond to pretty much every comment under my posts. And that's how you build a community, and that's how you meet people. And that's how I made some amazing connections from all over the world. And I wish more people would do that, because it's part of paying it forward. So when I was starting my career, uh, I was a little junior engineer, didn't know much, but I had some amazing people around me who were very helpful and guided me. What should I learn? What's important? How do you move forward in your career? So now I'm trying to pay it forward with the younger generation, and help them out in their journey.
How did the decision happen? You're going to be a solopreneur now. You're going to quit your job. I can imagine there's probably quite a bit of fear or uncertainty involved.
Not really. So here's why. So I started the YouTube channel in August of last year, and it took off pretty quickly. It surprised even me. Well, it completely surprised me. I wasn't expecting to get like quote unquote success straight away. And then some other things transpired, and then slowly the income from that source from content creation started picking up, and within a few months I was like, okay, this is going nicely. Maybe I can make something out of this. And I felt completely comfortable making the switch, knowing that I wouldn't be financially jeopardized at all. So then it was just it came down to making the decision if was I really passionate about this or not. So that was what was important to me, and if I committed to this, would I do it? Would I make something amazing for the community and for the people that follow me? And then I decided, okay, I really enjoy this. I know I can do some amazing things. So let's see, move into this full time, and let's see where I can take it. So here I am.
Amazing. So what had your back? Was it YouTube? Was it the community? Was it Patreon? Because you're a little bit everywhere.
Yeah. So
what gave you the most certainty? If, let's say somebody in our audience is thinking about something similar. What from your own platform or your own sort of fundamental areas where you were situated helped you the most to gain confidence?
So mostly it was so YouTube kind of started off slow, then picked up speed, and then it quickly plateaued because I'm still a relatively small channel, and kind of the amount of views I'm getting every month is more or less fixed. So but it's still a decent part of income. And then Patreon was actually what gave me the most confidence, because I started getting supporters very quickly, and it was growing exponentially from month to month. So and it's still growing much faster than I expected it, and I'm pretty comfortable where I am right now, and I'm even confident that in the growth that's going to come in the future, now that I'm able to deliver much more quality content.
And what is that quality content exactly? Like, what is your grand vision? Like, you have a community now that you're nurturing.
My vision is okay. So my idea behind this entire endeavor is I want to give the answer to all of the questions that I had, let's say, 3 years ago in my career. So back then, I was, let's say, a solid mid-level engineer looking to move up into a senior engineer, and I found about topics like clean architecture, domain-driven design, functional programming, things like that, and I was like scratching my head, what the hell is this? How do people do this? Okay, this is interesting, there's something there, but I don't understand anything. And so I slowly started like picking topics apart, researching, trying to learn more. And I struggled a lot because I don't think at the time there was a lot of good resources out there, especially on YouTube. So that's my game plan right now. So all of those questions that I had, I want to answer them right now. And I'm purposefully not creating like beginner level content. So I want it to be more advanced for the people that are more ahead in their careers, because I think that a lot of people have already covered the beginner level content really well, and there's no point repeating over that again, because I can't make up something new, but I can make something new about domain-driven design, clean architecture, the ideas that I had over the years, and so on.
So you were still working at the time when you started sort of learning and giving. By the sound of it, you were sharing your learning experience.
Pretty much, yeah.
But were you applying that knowledge, domain-driven design, but more complex, perhaps, clean architecture, maybe use case nuanced clean architecture, or vertical or onion, whichever variant it is, or hexagonal? Did you happen to apply it at your job, or was it theoretical? Was there a split there? How did you navigate that?
So that's a great question. So in the previous 3 years, I was working at my first company, and then I made the switch. So at the previous company, right, that's when I started getting into all of these topics, and I was still not somebody who could impact technical decisions on a team level, even though I tried to, because I saw the opportunity to apply everything I was learning about on the project, and I was pretty confident that I could make a positive impact on the delivery, on the software quality. But it wasn't a very good engineering environment. More senior people that were probably not comfortable with new technologies, they would overrule me. So I tried to do what I could, but didn't get a lot of chances to make impactful decisions. And then I switched companies, and had a chance to work on a greenfield project. And the engineer that was the senior engineer besides me, he saw potential in me and kind of gave me decision-making abilities, right? And then I could start slowly applying what I was learning all these years.
Yeah.
So the project was, from a technical perspective, we implemented it as a modular monolith. I've held a few talks about this. There's even a nice video of one presentation on my channel. So if anyone wants to dip your toes into modular monoliths, I suggest you go ahead and watch it. So that's how I started applying all of these things in practice, and slowly figuring out, okay, this is a good idea, this isn't a really good idea, and so on.
With architectural decisions, it's generally the long game. You're trading that perhaps naive or even arrogant overconfidence of, oh, we won't need this, I'm just going to hack it together right now. Because you want to deliver short term, but maybe you don't even have a strategic plan of how to maintain it. How does this impact cost going forward? Just understanding it. What is the level of complexity of the new engineers who will be brought onto this? How do you navigate? You said you tried it and it seemed like a good idea architecturally. How did you make that decision? How are you measuring architectural success? How are you measuring the impact of, let's say, clean architecture?
So we had a pretty good idea of what the system should be, or is going to be, a few years down the line.
Feature-wise or technically?
Kind of technically. Feature-wise, it was constantly evolving. But kind of the high-level overview of the system remains pretty much constant.
Okay.
So we knew we wanted it to be a monolith application to start out, just because we had a smaller team. We wanted to move faster. We wanted to have simple deployments and so on. But we also wanted the ability to, at any point, be able to move into microservices.
Okay.
So that's why we picked the modular monolith. And then we chose for the individual modules the clean architecture, because it was something that we were all familiar with. It was either that or an end-layered architecture, and we thought the clean architecture was a little bit cleaner. I know that sounds funny.
For a greenfield project, you probably didn't have enough layers even to...
Yeah. So we took it from there, and we worked on that for 2.5 years, and it served us really well. a few things that I liked, not from a technical perspective, but from a people perspective. We had several people leaving and joining the project, and all of the new people had consistently the same comment, and that is, I really like this architecture. It was very easy to get started and become productive.
To understand it, nothing about the project is in their way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I really love that. We get somebody on the project, get them set up, and within a few days they're ready to produce features. So on the module level, we organized using command query responsibility segregation. So it's basically just a logical separation of commands and queries at the application level. And what I like about it is, it focuses on use cases, features, and then when you scope it down to a feature level, anybody can easily reason, okay, this is what I need to do.
And it's
And that's
vertically
very
isolated from other features.
Yeah, it's very helpful for new people when you give them an assignment, and then they can take a look at existing stuff, and it flows very nicely, like from the API endpoint all the way down to the domain layer and back. It's a very clean, nice flow of data and commands to get back some result or modify some state. And yeah, it worked out really nicely.
It sounds like that isolation, specifically with clean architecture and use cases, you can sort of help somebody who's new to the team give that sense of confidence that they won't accidentally break something in an unrated feature. I think that recaptures the modular monolith benefits, right? So that you can isolate yourself to one bounded context in domain-driven design terminology, or perhaps even just an aggregate.
Yeah.
But the interesting part is, you said your content on your channel, which is amazing, by the way. We're gonna have a link in the doodly-doo for your channels. It's a bit of a paradox. I meet a lot of I coach teams directly, hands-on on projects, because I am sick and tired of conferences and books and just content in general that is being passively consumed and then not applied at work, because they might not have the freedom to change something very impactful and very important in their project. So I'm teaching, coaching, helping hands-on or just through advisory services on a critical project always, and it has really lifted off. But what I'm seeing constantly is that even senior level engineers, even architects, they might not know CQRS, they might not know clean architecture, they might never have heard about use cases, they might not even they've worked at a monolith, I'm sure, but maybe never in a modular one, maybe never in an event-driven modular one, or a CQRS-driven modular one that has event sourcing or not has event sourcing. And you mentioned that you create content for like mid-levels or juniors. So I'm seeing this paradox of like clean architecture does seem to be a simple concept, but it's mostly the more seasoned veteran engineers who seem to be gravitating towards it. So what's that? How do you navigate that? Have you found something similar?
I think when you, with more experience, you start to value not being limited by the architecture. And what I like about clean architecture, and kind of like my interpretation of it, is more aligned with the onion architecture. I just like calling it clean architecture because it sounds better. So what I like about it is I can work on my domain free of any technical constraints. I just think about, okay, these are my entities in my system. This is how they interact. These are the business operations that I need to support with them. And completely free of of technical constraints. It's also helpful for beginner engineers, because they're very familiar with object-oriented programming, and this is pretty much it, right?
Mhm.
And then
Okay.
when you take it up the architecture, again, the idea is implement your use cases free of technical constraints, hide the implementations behind interfaces, and so on. This is a part of a lot of discussions.
Especially hexagonal, because it
Oh
is a
yeah,
bit
well,
more
hexagonal is
regimented on.
a bit more like, I don't know. I haven't really researched it too much, but from my understanding, it's maybe a bit too on the a lot of abstractions, right?
Mhm.
For the input
It's
ports,
quite pedantic regarding.
yes, for the
Yeah.
input ports, for the output ports, and so on. I personally wouldn't be comfortable with as much complexity. I think you get similar benefits with something like a clean architecture, with less architectural components.
So less moving pieces.
Yes.
Okay, but not, from my understanding, nothing from hexagonal is wasted. So if nothing is wasted on either approach, what is the major difference?
I find the clean architecture simpler.
Simpler. So
Simpler to
from like a
implement, simpler.
from
Yeah, simpler
like
to
just
implement.
looking at it, eyeballing it topologically, it's easier to understand.
Yep.
Okay, so before we segue into frameworks and libraries, there's a question for Bogdan in chat, which I'm gonna bring up on the screen if this works. A modular monolith is a great choice for most startups. Question to you, Milan. Have you also used message queues to avoid tight coupling between the modules? And
Yes.
how? To expand on that
Yeah.
question, how?
Okay. So let me explain. So that's exactly what we did. So you want your modules to be completely independent. So they are. It's a monolith system. Everything is one code base, but you literally treat one module like a separate application. You can't say like.
Can we use the main-driven design terminology here?
So yeah, you can say it's a bounded context, pretty much.
Okay.
So each module is like a single bounded context. So let me give you like an example. We had like 5 or 6 modules. So it was an e-commerce system, kind of. So we had like the orders module, the catalog module. We had a module for user administration. We had a module for notification management, and a few more. So let me not go too much down that rabbit hole. So you want your modules or bounded contexts to be logically independent and also like architecturally. So how you do that is you need to solve the problem of communication between them without introducing coupling. And a great solution for that is using messaging. We were using specifically RabbitMQ. And at the library level, we were using mass transit for communication. So pretty much when something happens in one bounded context, you publish an event that goes over the queue, and then, or rather the topic, and then whoever is subscribed to that queue or topic gets the message and does whatever it wants with it.
Okay. Bogdan, thank you for the question. I hope if we missed some part of that question, that's very important. Please let us know in the comments. Regarding message queues specifically, what you mentioned a few frameworks. Frameworks, yes, no. You said you favor simplicity and the sort of the ease of just looking and using a clean architecture project. What do you do tactically? What do you use always, and what do you avoid to sort of keep yourself productive and sane? Is there something you always avoid? Is there something you never do? Do you have a strong opinion on ORMs perhaps? Or
Okay, so let's talk about something I never did, and I recently kind of made a switch, so to say. So I liked the extremely pedantic version of the clean architecture, where you abstract absolutely everything in the application layer. So interface all the things, right?
Yeah.
And that's great, but it slows you down. So that's my one concern. And in most of the projects I worked on, it was unnecessary. And I made a few posts about this recently. It started some great discussions, and most of the people agreed because you don't need the abstraction if you know your project is relatively stable and is unlikely to change. Um, but if you're working with some system that is unproven, right? I mean, if you're solving a problem that's already been solved, you can
Yeah.
research the best practices, come to a good architectural decision, and just apply that. But if you're working in a system that's something like brand new, revolutionary, then probably you do need the flexibility to make quick changes on the fly. So that's I don't know. I guess it's a science, like making the decision where, okay, in this system, an abstraction is appropriate, and in this system, we just don't need it.
Okay, so you mentioned that was something you stopped doing. What are you now doing instead?
Oh yeah. So the discussion was about abstracting away any framework core in the clean architecture.
Which
So
part exactly?
so all of it, right?
Okay, so routing, database access, DB contexts.
So the database context, right?
Okay.
So I used to use, and I mean I still do use repositories for data access, and just expose methods that would do something like load the
Sorry,
aggregate from the database.
Entity framework repositories or DDD repositories?
Domain-driven design repository. So just
Okay.
think of it like an interface.
Yeah, for a
Fetch the
collection.
aggregate,
Yeah.
fetch the aggregate, do something with the aggregate, persist it, and so on. And I mean, it's nice for a few reasons. It's easy to test. Like if you need to just test your logic without tampering with the data access, uh, it's very nice to create a few mocks, test your business logic, which is in the domain anyway, and you can write tests very quickly. Then it solves the problem of reusing queries because now you have a consistent interface for how you interact with your domain. If you were using EF Core, I mean, there's ways to solve this, but
It's too open.
people have too much freedom, right? And if they don't know what they're doing, they can end up
And link
duplicating.
view is amazing, and then you just abuse
Yeah,
it.
you end up duplicating a lot of code. This is
Yeah.
something that repositories also solve. And you get the supposed flexibility of being able to kind of switch implementations. I think this sounds really nice on paper, right? But if you try to switch from something like a relational database to, let's say, MongoDB or RavenDB or
Nobody does that
Cassandra, I
for
don't
something
know.
that was already written. Like that's just
No, but let's say you try to make the switch. You're probably going to run into a lot more trouble than just re-implementing your repository interface.
and that's
right?
a great point. Can we do a quick segue here? I'm coaching a lot of domain-driven design, one-on-one, publicly. I trigger a lot of flame wars, and I have my own group of trolls that come and talk to me when I post about TDD or ORMs. What I found, the biggest problem by far, and using domain-driven design terminology now, is that most companies or engineers or architects do not have aggregates in their system. They do not abstract away the compute part of the database. So they just use the database to store it, and then the compute part, joining data together. I'm using the word compute for that because the database actually has to do logic to join things together. That they leave partially in the database and partially in some weird relationship, sort of ORM, finicky, whatever they come up with, and that they then do dynamically all the time, rather than having the graph expressed cleanly. And the aggregate is always lacking. They use the repositories for entities, domain-driven design entities, never for aggregates, and they don't have aggregates in their system. And then the entry point is like a service of some kind, God forbid a controller or something. So you specifically said your repositories are for aggregates. Was that a conscious decision? Did you accidentally stumble upon that? Because that is a very advanced nuance. And I was wondering what your learning journey was up to that point.
So I mean, it makes no sense. So all your use cases are tied to aggregates and
Yes.
not like the individual entities.
The table. If I
Yes,
use an SQ, if
yes.
a relation, yeah.
So an aggregate being like a collection of tables, that are,
A graph, a tree of objects, not
yes.
just, yeah.
So it makes no sense to not return the entire aggregate. Although I'm making an interesting argument against that in a video coming out next week. So there's
Nice.
two sides, like to every story. So loading aggregates is how you think about domain-driven design.
Mhm.
The one problem I have with that is some aggregates end up being large or semi-large, and you get a performance penalty for loading an entire aggregate to perform some simple business operation. Um, so, so the question I ask is, should you be pragmatic when you know that the use case you're doing in this request
Mhm.
doesn't require the entire aggregate? What's your opinion on that?
You said something really important there when you say sometimes you load way too much of the aggregate. And I got curious with modern frameworks, especially TypeScript, C Sharp, and Spring and Ruby. My question is, why do you unload your aggregate? If you have your aggregate, if you're using CQRS, then you have a very distinct asymmetric command processor that's handling the write side, and you have a separate query side. If you only need your aggregate for doing the write sides, and you're not like doing some weird heavy load balancing where one aggregate simultaneously lives in multiple contexts that can have race conditions, why do you unload it? Right? If you just load it once, perhaps even through a write-through cache, then the next time the request comes in, there is no penalty for having it there.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my immediate feedback on that. But sometimes I am now working with a company that's using PHP heavily, right? And that is a luxury that doesn't exist unless you go into the more exotic frameworks of event-driven PHP, which, I mean, that's a whole new kind of worms. But there, I see that problem existing. It's like, yeah, every request is fresh, clean. That was the whole point with PHP, that there should never be memory leaks because we just spawn it up and throw it away. But still, even in that environment, Doctrine and Symfony and Laravel are one of the most used frameworks, and they do this. They do compute on the fly every time a use case gets triggered,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't abstract this away. They don't abstract the compute away. They have sort of like weirdly coupled lazy loading and everything, but it's that's still overhead. Like, we didn't make it faster. We just made the slow part less evil.
Mm-hmm.
What I like to use is event sourcing primarily that has a write-through cache on the command processor.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my solution to that. Now it's up to the framework, or rather the language
But
context, the stack.
how scalable is that, right?
The question really
if you
is
try to have all of the aggregates consistently being kind of in some sort of a cache,
that's a
you're
good
kind
question.
of limited by the physical memory of your cache.
See, the thing is, I've always worked in systems where, if I'm using event sourcing and I'm closing aggregates, so if I know that certain aggregates are dead, that they're being tombstoned down,
Mm-hmm.
then if I architect my system in such a way that the alive ones are always in a hot part, it's very likely that that part of the database, the part of the data, if you come to a dashboard and it starts with last 2 weeks by default, I can probably keep all of the active users as aggregates for last 2 weeks in memory. I'm not saying the entire system, because that's unrealistic, and that has a sort of unbounded exponential scaling problem. But I can at least focus on the use case of the critical path, the current active paying users using current data.
Mm-hmm.
And for a given business context, that is always statically sized. So
Yep.
I like having even an asymmetry in architecture where a large part of my system is focused just on that, and it does really weird shit. It's like keeping everything in memory, using files, using like very extremely simple moving parts. And then the long-lasting, the archived stuff, the telemetry that you require for, like horizontally aggregating across multiple aggregates instead of different bounded contexts. You said e-commerce. In every e-commerce system, there's that bounded context of doing analysis, of doing like sales reports, and then those are cross-cutting concerns across all aggregates. That obviously, I don't keep everything in memory. That would be crazy. But that can be solved in a separate context. So my approach would always be as aggressively simple as possible for the hot part of the system. And I would introduce abstraction there. Is this hot? Is this not hot? Is this part of the system being constantly used compared to that? For Amazon, the marketplace and checkout. That I would design completely differently than some weird 10-year-old affiliate marketing landing page.
Yep. I understand the angle you're coming from.
For clean architecture specifically, perhaps there's viewers who are not familiar with it. You call it onion architecture. What are the pieces of the onion?
So it's called the onion architecture because when you slice the onion across, you get a pair of, or rather, all of the layers. They look like concentric circles. So that's how the clean architecture or the onion architecture came to be.
How many circles?
Depends, right? You have complete freedom, in my opinion, to make as many layers as you want. So the standard approach is you have in the core the domain layer, and then on top of it you have the application layer, and those two are kind of the most important, containing your enterprise logic. And then outside you have, let's say, the outer layer, which you can slice horizontally, let's say, into
slice
multiple
into chunks, but still remaining outside.
Yeah, you just call them all outer layer, pretty much. So typically there's presentation, which is your entry point into the system. This can be an API exposing endpoints. This can be your MVC application exposing views to your client side.
Like an interface in a classical sense.
Yep.
Like a facade for interacting with it.
And you have the infrastructure layer, which holds your external facing concerns like database, email systems, storage, like blob storage or simple storage service, Amazon S3, and so on. And then, from that point, like there are many flavors. Some people like to split the infrastructure layer even further, and so on. So you have a lot of freedom, but I'd say like the core, which is the domain and the application layers, are kind of the constant. And then there's also like, where do you place stuff that needs to be shared everywhere? You always need some sort of base types and so on. So this is like
DTOs, authentication, credentials, keys, ACL.
You can place those like wherever it makes most sense
for the project.
Yes.
What about you mentioned now that you're doing clean architecture, you started using some new technologies, some new approaches. You mentioned EF Core. What is it that you discovered or always use now that you're using clean architecture? A new kind of database? I saw you mention RavenDB once. What do you use now that you didn't before with clean architecture?
So I always used, I've been a relational DB fan like for most of my career, simply because you can build anything with them and they're going to perform really well for probably 90% of the use cases out there.
And they're cheap.
And also they're the most popular in terms of getting engineers that also know how to use that database, right?
Yeah.
So I've been using SQL Server, Microsoft's SQL Server, for quite a lot. And then I made the switch to PostgreSQL, and I absolutely love it.
Because of
It's
the
open
JSON
source.
features.
Yes, because of the
Yes.
JSON features.
I knew it. Me too. Big fan.
So what's interesting is people maybe don't know PostgreSQL is an object relational database.
Yes.
So it's kind of different from a typical relational database in that you can actually store literally objects in the database, and it works just as fine. So you get a lot of freedom to do some things that you can't do in SQL Server. You can store arrays in the database, whereas in SQL Server this would be probably
In a cell. Let's be
yeah,
specific.
you can
can
literally store an
yeah.
array, and it's persisted as an array, and you can have array operations on it.
Yeah.
In like SQL
Same for
Server,
JSON.
you would have to do maybe a string, a comma separated value string, and then
And
parse
export it
that.
and convert it in,
And
convert it out.
it's not very
Type-
nice to work
type
with.
corrections.
And also, like there's the JSON support with PostgreSQL, which is unparalleled as of yet.
And
There's
indexed.
also
It is indexed inside the JSON, which
yes,
which is amazing.
So there's an awesome library. It's called Martin that works on top of Postgres, and it gives you it literally turns Postgres into a document database. So we have a question.
And an event source to document database if you go down that route a little bit further. I listen to a lot of Oscar's talks, so quite a Martin fan myself. We'd like to do a little bit of clean architecture bingo. We have about 15 minutes. I would like to name a few services and classes, class names and concepts. And I would like you to just shotgun your first answer for which slice you would put it into. If you say domain, application, infrastructure, if I name a few things, where would you put them?
Oh, okay. Okay, let's do it.
Okay, let's start with simple ones. A order controller.
So that would be a presentation layer.
Okay. An order.
Domain.
Cashier.
Also domain.
Stripe connector.
Ooh, so that's where it gets interesting. So the implementation of that would live probably in infrastructure, but you would create an abstraction, like an interface behind that you would use in application layer. So it kind of splits into two.
Okay. And what is the derivative that makes it to the domain?
Good question. Probably it doesn't make it to the
events, orders, updates.
I guess you need to update like the status of the order, most likely from like I don't know,
that's what
pending to paid, something like that. But it ends up being a method call, most likely.
Good. I like this answer. It's gonna get tougher. Create order command.
So that goes in the application layer, right? But it's used from the top, from the entry point of your system, and then it triggers the creating of the order.
Okay. Cart abandonment service.
Ooh, that's interesting. So do you want to give me more detail what it does, or should I like
let's say it has the list of carts that have been abandoned and you can do something with them.
So that's interesting. So you named it cart abandonment,
which is domain specific, right?
Yes.
Because there is something.
So you're kind of implying, I mean, you're not implying, the name is implying that this could be some sort of domain service, right? Which would then place it in the domain layer. But it's kind of tough to just guess from the name. I need to know maybe a little bit more what it does to come to the final decision. But yeah,
I like your thought process on this, because a lot of developers struggle with this. Does it go here? Does it go there? Based on the name.
Let's say it's a domain service. Like, I mean, it makes sense.
Makes sense. Okay. Taxation strategy. And we're not an accounting software application. It's just e-commerce.
So this to me looks like a business concern.
Okay.
Right?
But it's not the primary domain per se.
Right. But it could be like a separate bounded context.
Fair. And then it lives where?
Well, I'd still put it in the domain layer, right? But of that separate bounded context.
Okay, so it's communicating with the main domain through interactors through an application layer or infrastructure.
Yes.
Okay, that's important, right? So the domain they're not touching. It's two onions.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Okay. I like this. Okay, let's go a little bit more complex. A Slack notification notifier or Slack notifier for purchases.
Okay, so this is your typical infrastructure level concern, but it's interesting how you can interact with it through the application or domain layers. So the Slack
Because you
or
might have it in the
any
domain.
kind of notification,
Yeah.
right? This can be an email notification, an in-app notification, or something like that.
But it's rich.
It's not part of your domain, right? What's part of your domain is some event. Something happened, and this something is worth notifying the user. So how I implement concerns like this is through the use of domain events, which convey some message, like something happened. In this case, let's say order payment failed. Okay, this event gets triggered in either my domain or in the application layer, and then I have something handling this event that would trigger a notification.
Okay, I like that answer. Thank you. Okay, a few more. Data warehouse order history exporter.
Can you repeat that?
It's a data warehouse order history exporter. It's basically CDC to an external system.
So pretty much, this looks like some sort of supporting domain. I'm not sure what the proper name would be.
I don't know either. I just want to get it across in.
So this is something that is part of your system, but
it's ETL or CDC. It's
probably
funneling data.
It's not part of your core domain.
Correct.
So this is something that, I mean, it looks like an, let's say, persistence infrastructure level concern, something that would be fetching orders, right, and exporting them somewhere. So let's say infrastructure level, and it most likely does some transformations on that data before persisting it elsewhere. But this is something like that's used probably for reporting purposes. It's not part of your core domain at all.
Absolutely. Now, if I take away that exporter sort of service terminology and replace it with topic and make it event-driven / event sourced, does its location change?
No.
Okay, so it's still infrastructure.
It just the output, the destination of where you're exporting to changes.
Okay, I'm happy with this clean architecture bingo. Thank you for playing along. This I always love when you get to the that's tricky. I always loved that part. Now that you're sort of an influencer and sort of doing videos,
I don't like that term.
Oh, no, you're a tech influencer, Milan. Okay.
So okay, I'll let it slide.
You're a community leader, let's say. You have a lot of, you're a content creator, you have influence in the tech community, especially like a strong following in the C# community. Like at the recording time, you have 11K subscribers on your newsletter. You're very active on Twitter.
Just crossed 12K.
Just 12K.
Eventually consistent, you know.
And you have what, 50K followers overall on LinkedIn, I believe.
So yeah, close to 50, and then 26 something on YouTube, and 8 or something on Twitter. So closing in probably on
100K ish.
Yeah, 100K ish across all networks.
Yeah, across all networks. Do you still provide services to companies? Is it just educational? Do you still work with companies?
So I guess this is tied into like how do I plan to remain relevant? This is something that a lot of people, while I was in the process of leaving my job and switching into this, a lot of people have asked me, how are you going to keep your edge now that you're not working on commercial projects? So I'm still unsure. Like, I have a few ideas. One idea is just simple freelancing from time to time. It's enough to kind of still keep in touch with real world projects.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to do is to get more engaged in the open source community.
Okay.
I want to start contributing on my GitHub account. I want to create some sort of clean architecture template that
We're
people
talking
can use.
framework, library, guidelines.
Yeah, scaffold, something like that.
So like a starter generator.
Yes,
Are you aware
something
of
like
of NX or?
I know of a few solutions.
Okay.
I just want to implement something that has my ideas,
Fair.
and then
Okay.
if people see value, they'll use it. Um, one such example was Jason Taylor's architecture. So kind of he was the person that I ran into on YouTube that was talking about this, and I enjoyed his implementation. I would probably do something similar, just expand a little bit more on the domain side, because that's where I think we're still lacking. Like, I don't see as many people talking about using domain-driven design, probably because there aren't as many people
There aren't,
actually
yeah.
using domain-driven design on
And
projects.
that is also one of the main things I saw lacking on the front end or the full stack space, is that they are now so powerful in their technology that they don't really have a strong business concern abstraction layer. And then we have these frameworks on top of frameworks. React is just a library, it's not a framework, it's just a tool. But then it's missing that domain layer on the front end
Yep.
middleware. And I see a lot of developers struggling with that because they're just used to thinking about HTML and how to make it work. But now the framework took it away. But the jobs are still there. Like, the complexity of building an application did not decrease. It's just you just had to learn a framework. And I find it fascinating that if a framework is really good, there will be job titles posted for just using the framework. Like, there are job titles being posted for React developer or Angular developer because the framework is actually encapsulating a way of work, not just being a tool. But I don't see that in the backend space for I want a clean architect or I want a
Right,
TDD
but
practitioner
I mean, yeah,
or a
there is a
craftsman.
.NET developer, right? But
Opposed to C# developer, like, did you see a gap there?
there's the
Or
same thing,
yeah,
probably.
it is the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, but you're right. There's not architect. I mean, it wouldn't be. Let's say it would be architecture specific, because we have one framework and then we apply various architectures.
But
Whereas,
C#
but
and .NET
but
is a little
C
bit.
sharp, I'd say, is not opinionistic, right?
Yeah.
To how you should structure your application, you have complete freedom to do that. Whereas I personally worked with Angular a lot, and Angular is very opinionistic
Right.
in how you should structure your application. And I found it really nice, pretty easy to work with, because it's similar to how you do it in MVC.
Yeah. I mean, it's where it started, right? It was essentially MVC, but they required two-way data binding in MVC. And then Mishko Heber even spoke on this, and I think Rivets.js is the first prototype that he created before Angular 1 that I used religiously, but it was quite clumsy to use because this is back from Macromedia Flash, when in ActionScript in Flash, you had two-way data binding in a way that you had nowhere else on the web. And that was one of the biggest productivity vessels for building things, interactive applications on the web back then, in the 2000s to 2005 sort of era, before Apple killed Flash. Okay. Is there anything else we'd like to share with your community? Like, how can they reach out to you? Are you open to having a conversation with them? Like, what is the best way to get in touch with Milan and have a flame war on ORMs?
So it's best to like comment on some posts where I'm preaching ORMs and then come in as a hater. I honestly enjoy when people disagree with me because I try to kind of see it from their perspective. Like, why do they have such a strong feeling against whatever I'm talking about? And is this strong feeling justified? And then you just engage in a thoughtful discussion, and if they want to have a chat, we both end up learning something, or we can completely like disagree. But I try not to fight with people; it leads nowhere. As far as where you can reach me, pretty much anywhere. Your best bet is probably LinkedIn or Twitter. More likely on LinkedIn. And people send me messages like all the time, and I almost always respond. And they end up being surprised, like, "Oh, you actually responded," And I think it's sad that people get surprised by that, right? Because it probably means that other people are not doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I try to like give a few minutes to anyone that reaches out. I know that's not scalable because the more and more people reach out, it's going to be not manageable to do that.
It's an input problem. At a certain point, you just can't keep up writing messages.
Yeah, it's like a producer-consumer, right? I need to implement a back pressure algorithm.
ChatGPT is there to help you. Okay. Well, Milan, thank you so much for taking the time to come on today. This was very educational. What is your next video? If you drop a teaser on your YouTube channel, what's coming?
The next video. Oh, so I'm not going to tell you tomorrow's video. It's something special.
Something special. Okay.
It's my first sponsored video, and it's a very popular cloud platform. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
And for next week, I have some interesting stuff around working with large aggregates, and then something that I think may make Dapper a thing of the past.
Ambitious. Okay, looking forward to it.
It should be interesting.
Okay, Milan. Thank you very much for coming on.
It was an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed the Clean Architecture Bingo. That was super creative. And I'd love to come again.
I'll gladly have you again as a guest. No problem. To our viewers, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for collaborating in chat. I really love the interactive elements as much as possible. If you liked this content, a lot of you aren't subscribed, so I know you like this content. I know you're looking for the next episode, and then you're asking me, "Hey, Denis, I missed it." You can subscribe, and then you can stay in touch. You can subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe on LinkedIn. You can follow me, and I'll be sure to keep you notified. Thank you so much for being with us, and see you next time.